Hi, and welcome to the Common Ego community. Here we talk about emotional abuse and spiritual awakening and the connection between the two. And there's definitely a connection. Okay, so let's get started. My name is Christina, and today we're going to be talking about 5 things you can expect when you cut ties with an emotionally abusive person. Could be a narcissist, it could be anyone who's been emotionally abusing you. If you've been caught up into that trap, here are 5 things you can expect. Okay, so number 1, it's going to seem a little bit obvious, like, okay, why are you even saying this? But hear me out. So number 1 is loneliness and isolation. Now, the obvious element to it is whenever you end any relationship, you're going to feel some level of loneliness, some level of isolation, right? But there are a few reasons, actually 3 reasons, why it's a little bit stronger, a little bit more intense when you end an emotionally abusive relationship, why loneliness is a little bit more intense. And so number 1, it's common for emotional abusers to isolate their targets. So if you're in a relationship with somebody who is emotionally abusive, they may try to separate you from your friends, from your support network. And that just gives them more power, which is why they do it. Not all of them do it, and some of them do it to lesser extents. But then there's also the isolation that comes afterwards. So especially if you're dealing with a narcissistic personality, they're likely to try to turn people against you. So this would be the kind of person who's going to trash your name after you end this relationship. So it doesn't matter whether it's a romantic relationship, a friendship, or like a family relationship that you're cutting ties with, this person will rally the troops against you. And there's a common term that people use when talking about narcissists and this type of behavior, and they say they're flying monkeys, right? Because it's much like they're just a troop. They don't really think for themselves. They just believe everything the narcissist is saying, and they turn against you. So that's another reason why it can be a little bit more isolating to end an emotionally abusive relationship, because the emotional abuser makes it so. They make sure it's an isolating experience when you end a relationship with them. They want you to suffer, make no mistake about it. It's all part of their plan. And the third reason why it's a little bit more isolating is a little bit more complex, and it has to do with your own emotional state during the relationship. Now, in the beginning, you may have been a little bit more independent. Maybe you had some codependent tendencies which got you sucked into this relationship in the first place, but you're probably a little bit more of an independent person than you are at the end of the relationship. That's because the abuse is designed to kind of knock you down, to ruin your self-esteem. And what happens in a lot of cases is that during emotional abuse, the person who is a target of abuse, their self-esteem gets tied into the other person's approval and to the relationship's success in general. So if that person turns their back on you, you feel a deeper level of isolation than someone else would at the end of a relationship. Because not only are you losing that person, it's almost like you're losing a part of yourself, because you had emotionally invested so much. You'd put your value into that relationship, into that other person's approval, and now it's gone. So even if you did it, even if you were the one to end the relationship, you still have those feelings, because it's a very deep and complex relationship, and that's what makes it so difficult. These are what people call the trauma bonds, what keeps you going back even after you know that it's abuse, right? Number 2 is obsessing over labels. And I did another video about this. You can go ahead and watch that. I'll link to it. But it's easy to get obsessed with trying to diagnose this person, just trying to figure out exactly what you're dealing with, right? I know I did it. I went deep into it. I tried to learn everything I possibly could to help me understand what was this person thinking, because they're not going to tell you, right? You know that. So you kind of obsess about finding the details and trying to figure out what's going on behind the scenes, because all this time you're just realizing you had no idea. So you want answers. And it's natural and there's nothing wrong with it. I'm not trying to discourage or shame anybody for digging into this. I've done it myself. And it's helpful in a lot of ways. But it has to come a point where you realize that it's time to stop and move on, because you can get lost in the details. You can get lost in the anger and the, oh yeah, that's right, he did this to me too, or she did that. You hear other people's stories and you're brought back into those moments again and again and again. And that's not really what all this is about. So going through this, coming out on the other side, we really truly want to come out on the other side. And you can't do that if you're obsessing over this person or the situation. So at some point, we have to just step back and say, I'm not going to look into this anymore. I'm not going to research. I'm not going to listen to every story to try and figure out what was going on in that person's mind. The other side of that is you don't want to pretend it didn't happen, right? You don't want to just, put your blinders on and act like, okay, well that chapter of my life is closed and now I'm good. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to deal with it. Because if you do that, there's a good chance that lesson is going to keep coming up again. You actually have to learn the lesson. And it's a little bit deeper, I think, than what most people realize. It's not surface level. And it's different for everybody. The lesson you have to learn, I guarantee you, is different than the lesson I learned. Because it's all very, very personal. We have to dig deep within ourselves to figure out what's going on there and what needs to be addressed. Another thing that you can expect is emotional upheaval. And it's part of what I talked about in the last part of number 2. It's when you start looking into yourself and what brought you into this relationship and what kept you there in the early stages before the trauma bond really took hold. When you start looking into those things and looking into what triggered you during the relationship and why those things were such triggers for you, there's so much to explore. You start really unearthing things that you had previously hidden from yourself. And I guess that's a little deep, but we all have issues that at the time it's more convenient to just store them away. Let's just bury them for now. We'll deal with them another time. But another time never comes. We're never sitting around like, oh yeah, let me think about that, let me deal with that negative emotion that I suppressed before. No, there's never a good time to deal with it, right? So it just stays hidden. But when you're dealing with emotional abuse, when you realize that and you start doing the work, the inner work on yourself, it's kind of like you pull at a string. Something comes up. You figure out, you make a connection. But the next time, you don't have to pull at this string. It just comes up. A lot of stuff bubbles up to the surface. If you're ready for it, if you're open to it, a lot of stuff bubbles up to the surface. And it's a very emotional time. And you'll think about things that you had completely forgotten about. Things that you didn't even realize hurt you as deeply as they did. It all bubbles up to the surface. So that's another thing to expect during this time. Now we're getting to the good stuff. When you start going through this emotional upheaval, keep your eyes open. Pay attention to what's going on around you, because I can almost guarantee you're going to start noticing things. What are you going to notice? It's different for everyone, but you'll start to see synchronicities that you never saw before. Things that, oh, I was just thinking about this thing and bam, there it is in your face, it happens. Or maybe you see numbers. Some people do, I don't. Numbers don't really have a lot of meaning for me. But some people see like repetitive numbers. Like you might get a receipt with the numbers 1111 is a common one. Or you might look at the clock at that time. Or it could be any set of numbers. And you'll see them again and again and again and again. And these synchronicities are very spiritually linked. And we'll talk about that more in another video. But just start paying attention. Just start paying attention, because this is when the good stuff comes. This is when we start getting the benefits of having been through all of the emotional turmoil. And it's subtle at first, but it's there. And the more you start paying attention, the more you'll notice. And paying attention to these synchronicities will also help you pay attention to the things that are going on around you, the things that are going on in your life. And that will help you get back in touch with the intuition that you will likely cut yourself off from when you were in a relationship with a narcissist or another emotional abuser. Because in a relationship with that kind of person, you can't really be trusting your intuition, or else you probably would have run a long time ago, right? You've had to shut off your intuition in order to keep that relationship going. So paying attention to these synchronicities and paying attention to the world around you, things that are happening, things that people are saying, common themes. Start paying attention to those things and you'll notice them more often. And you'll start to feel more in touch with yourself and with your own intuition, which is super important. Number 5 is the culmination of all of these things. It is a spiritual awakening. It is, and this experience is different for everyone. But essentially what will start to happen is you'll realize that there's more to this life. There's just more. And whether you're getting more in touch with your religious roots, Christianity, Buddhism, whatever, or if you're just feeling more spiritual, if you're suddenly feeling the presence of angels and spirit guides, you're feeling like you're not alone in this world. Synchronicities and things like that, once you start paying attention, it's hard to ignore. It really is. I know if you're not there yet, it may sound crazy, but when you start paying attention, really, really paying attention, you can't ignore it. And it's pretty amazing. But these are 5 important things that I wanted to share with you today, because it takes you from a place of loneliness and lack to a place of hope and inspiration. And that's where we all need to go. We all need to get there. There's a little work that needs to be done in order to get there, but it's there for all of us. And at the end, we may end up thanking the narcissist or the emotional abuser in our lives. I know I have a completely different perspective on it now than I did in the days when I was waking up to the fact that all the toxicity was really abuse. So yeah, so there's a lot to this, and I will be making a lot of other videos. So if you like hearing about this, if you want to connect and talk about it, please comment below, tell me your experience. And if you want to see more videos like this, hit the subscribe button and be sure to click that notification bell so you can be notified at any time I post a new video. All right, that's all I have for now. Talk soon.